Welcome everyone to the Utah League of Cities and Towns Economic Impact of COVID-19 Town Hall Series. This has been our Monday afternoon tradition for all of life, really post-March. You have pre-COVID life and post-COVID life, and so thank you for spending your Monday afternoon with us again. And we are thrilled to be joined anew by Juliet Tennert, who's the Chief Economist at the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute, as well as a trio of guests from the Multicultural Affairs. We have Nubia Pena, who will be joining us. Nubia is the Director of the Utah Division of Multicultural Affairs. We'll have Byron Russell, who is the Co-Chair of the Utah Multicultural Affairs Commission, and Zhi Zhao, who is the Director of the Mayor's Office for New Americans. They'll speak to us about the impact of COVID-19, particularly on communities of color in our state. Then we'll have Wayne Bradshaw. You all know Wayne. He'll give us another update on the CARES Act implementation, as well as the discussions going on in DC around the fourth stimulus, which, Wayne, to my knowledge, still has not been released from the Senate Republican caucus, right? The last time I checked my email 15 minutes ago, I didn't see a bill yet.
I just checked now and it has not been released yet, so.
Okay, so we have a general sense of what's coming in that bill and what it means for cities, but we don't have an exact bill yet, and it is 5 o'clock DC time, so stay tuned. And then we'll finish up with Tony Young, who is the Media Relations Manager for the Governor's Office of Economic Development, to talk about the In Utah campaign, which is an effort to try to improve consumer confidence in Utah. So we'll start, Juliet, with you. You've been a regular guest on our town halls, and thank you. You feel like an extended member of the family now. And Juliet, each time that you have joined us, you have successfully given us positive news and have always helped us see the positive outlook of what was coming. Then we gave you a month off, and now the news, is starting to be less positive. So with that as an intro for you, give us a sense of what you're seeing about the economic impact in Utah and around the country for our cities from COVID-19 right now.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Cameron. As always, I appreciate the opportunity to join you, and I do feel like family. As an economist, it's so important to understand what's going on at the very local level. So thanks for all the work that you and your team are doing. It's helping me tremendously to try to understand what's going on at the state level. I will go ahead and share screen so we can show you some data. You know, you think that after having done this, however many times we've done it, I would be quicker at the draw, but thanks for your patience. Okay, so here we are at the end of July, and as Cameron mentioned, I've been doing this for quite a while now, since March. And I think that initially when we were sharing some of the data, they looked just incredibly bad. We turned a corner in April. Things started to improve, and so we've been sharing those data points with you, and we'll share kind of the current state of the Utah economy, a little bit of a local perspective, and then I can share some of my thinking about what the outlook looks like. So as Cameron mentioned, you know, things over the past month have changed, or maybe they haven't changed, maybe they just haven't changed a whole lot, in that things are starting to kind of settle a bit, and they're settling in a pretty challenging time. So we'll take a look at those data points, and then if there are, hopefully there'll be a little bit of time for questions, because as I mentioned, I always end up learning more from you than really I think sometimes I'm sharing with you. So thanks for that opportunity.
Well, yeah, Juliet, as always, if people do have questions, just put them in the chat box.
Perfect. And
we'll monitor that. We'll be going till about 3:20 on this piece of the town hall.
Perfect, thank you. So first of all, as has been tradition, I've been sharing with you some additional resources. I do want to make sure there is a phone call happening on Wednesday that I think that you all should be aware of. I do quite a bit of work with the Volcker Alliance, which is a state and budget policy, state and local budgeting policy think tank out of New York. They've teamed up with Penn to do some webinars on the current climate. And they're doing some analysis of the role of federal dollars, looking and how they're addressing these state and local needs. They're doing that webinar on Wednesday. It will be at, I guess it would be, you will do the math for me, but I'm pretty sure it will be at 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. But it's a free webinar, and there's so many of these things on our calendars, but this is one resource that I certainly will be taking advantage of. Really excellent information coming out of the Volcker Alliance. So, of course, we'll share the slides with you later, and you'll have the slides documented. And then one more thing to mention, my boss, the Associate Dean of the David Eccles School of Business and the Executive Director of the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute, Natalie Gochner, she has a piece in the Deseret News from over the weekend. And if you haven't had the chance to take a look at that, I would encourage you to pull that up at some point. It's a nice overview on kind of the state of the economy, what we should all be thinking about right now. And I just want to mention that my presentation draws heavily from the work that Natalie did with the Des News editorial board. So if you want even more in-depth analysis, take a look there. So let's jump into some of the data. And, if you've been listening in for the last couple of months, you know that I track the economy through jobs data. State and local governments, of course, you're probably most concerned with revenue collections data. And so we'll show you some revenue collections data as well. But the jobs data are our most timely data. They're most comprehensive, and we don't run into issues with, for example, in tax collections, revenues data. Sometimes there's some timing issues that we can get kind of wonky results. And so, of course, we're going to share some of that with you today, and they're a great indicator of the economy. But the jobs data truly tell the story of where we were, where we currently are, and where we're going. Weekly initial unemployment insurance claims, those claims when folks are initially logging on to the Department of Workforce Services to file a claim for unemployment insurance, are just this excellent, very, very timely indicator. At the beginning of April, we had 33,000 Utahns who filed a claim for unemployment insurance. So the good news is, and we would have been presenting these data to you along the way, that number has dropped dramatically. So at last count, we had about 5,000 Utahns who filed a claim for unemployment insurance. So I'm saying that the economic hemorrhaging has stopped. And it's maybe interesting to use that analogy when we're actually still dealing with a health crisis and a pandemic. And, so there's maybe a different story on the health side. But at least for the economy, that hemorrhaging has stopped. Really good news. But I just want to put this into perspective for you. We've had almost 215,000, 215,000, almost, Utahns who have filed a claim for unemployment insurance. In the whole of 2019, we had 60,000 unemployment insurance claims. And so, well, this is really welcome data to see. Again, these numbers look so much better than they did when we were initially presenting this data point to you. Things are settling, but they're settling at an elevated level. So really 5 times the normal level of folks filing a claim for unemployment insurance. Another way to look at this would be to look at just the total number of jobs in Utah. The good news is job growth has actually returned. So it's actually, sometimes as economists, we like to kind of pat ourselves on the back when we actually get a projection right. I don't know how many times that happens, maybe 12 times out of 9 or something, I don't know. But so we were predicting, in April when we were seeing that economic hemorrhaging, kind of understanding the nature of the impact, we were anticipating that we would see a return to job growth over in the 2 to 3 month horizon. And so our prediction is right, we're actually seeing that. So here we're looking at the total number of jobs in the state of Utah. And just for context, I'm showing you back to the last economic expansion, and through the last economic recession there in 2009. But you can see February of 2020, we hit a peak, and that just drops dramatically. Get to April, where we hit April, May, we hit a trough, And we actually are seeing job growth. So again, positive news. This is good news that the hemorrhaging has stopped. But to give you some perspective, we're now at 2018 levels of employment. So we've seen a return to job growth. Some of those jobs are coming back online. But in terms of where we were in our history, we're still about 2 years we're still at a level like we were 2 years ago. Maybe another way to think about this would be that during the Great Recession, from peak to trough, the employment base contracted by about 7%. And during the time that we were talking about that contraction, it will go down to the history books. It currently is into the history books, a very, very severe contraction. So employment contraction of 7% over a 2-year period, right? So from 2007 through 2009, employment base contracted by 7% in the state of Utah. Over that 2-month period for COVID-19, our employment base contracted by 9%. So again, speaking to the severity of what we've experienced. Let's take a look at the unemployment rate, just because that's kind of a nice way to measure where we are relative to other places. And this is where some of the kind of good news, silver lining stories have been. So with all of that job loss, and then there's been a return to job growth, but still jobs are at that 2018 level, Utah's unemployment rate is about 5%, so 5.1%. Now, 5% of Utah's labor force currently is looking for a job. That is about double what it was prior to the contraction. So, I mean, relative to our history, it's quite severe. Now, we look to other states here and we see those kind of darker, you'll excuse our color scheme here. I would like to see the University of Utah red, but I'm trying to back off of it a little bit. But those darker kind of brown rust colors are those areas that are most impacted. I mean, Nevada, 15% unemployment in Nevada, speaks to the lack of diversification in its economy. 15% unemployment rate in California. Again, California's economy wasn't as well positioned as Utah going into this thing. And of course, they've had very, very severe health impacts going on, leading to that type of result. And so we can see in our unemployment rate that we're well positioned, but 5% unemployment is a 5% unemployment rate is quite elevated. And it's been so interesting to me to watch these unemployment rates because, I guess maybe it's been a while since I have been in school. I always say it hasn't been that long since I've been in school. But when we're in school, we kind of are taught kind of rule of thumb that the natural rate of unemployment, maybe somewhere between, like 4 and 7%, kind of depends, like right when you're in school, essentially. Like it used to be between 6 and 8, and maybe like between 4 and 7%. So, unemployment rate of 5% sounds like, right in line with potentially what a natural rate of unemployment is. There's always going to be some amount of unemployment in the economy. But I think you're going to see research on this coming out more and more into the future. There's a new normal for the natural rate of unemployment. But, the transaction time between switching jobs is much shorter because of technology than it used to be. And so that would kind of lower that natural rate of unemployment. Labor force participation is lower. There's less people participate, just generally structurally participating in the labor force, and so that kind of impacts that natural rate of unemployment. And so when you hear about a 5.1% unemployment rate, good relative to other places, but still is not. I don't think of that as Utah's natural rate of unemployment. One maybe bit of silver lining in all of this is that economy or economic outcomes cause movement and migration. And so as long as Utah's economy is better relative to other places, we should see population and jobs coming into the state to take advantage of the variation in that economic climate. And so on all, that actually does support our economic growth. And that's really been the Utah story throughout time for some of our much of the growth that we've just posted over the last expansion, much of that's been relative, that's like kind of relative strength that kind of feeds itself, self-reinforcing growth. And so, this sort of result gives me hope for the future, but still presents a tremendous amount of challenge. So really, really macro, big numbers, kind of where we've been, where we are, helps us to kind of think about where we're going. I just want to maybe look at this in a couple of different ways, and this is hopefully helpful as you're thinking about the situation for your local region, because every place is different. So kind of thinking about the makeup of your economy, given some of these numbers that I'll share with you, will help you kind of inform what you think about the future. But every corner of the economy has been impacted, now to different degrees. So looking at the change in jobs between last June and this June, the total economic basis or employment basis contracted just under 3%. Really, you can see there though that every sector has pretty much been impacted. Leisure and hospitality, no surprise in what we've been looking at, has just been pounded. Natural resources and mining has been pounded, and that's COVID-19 plus just some other economic things going on. So for many of our rural communities, this is, even if there's not as much of the health impact going on, the economic impact is there. A bright spot is construction. We're seeing construction jobs up 9% year over, and that speaks to some of the housing supply issues, right? Just trying to get more. There's still much demand for housing out there. That supply trying to keep up with the demand. And again, sometimes the revenue collections are a little bit tricky to wrap your arms around, just given kind of timing and filings, and comparing your year can be a little bit difficult. But if we look at quarters and we look at the most recent data coming out of the tax commission, right? They always they do the local distributions towards the end of the month. We see those data, and then we see what's called the TC23 report, usually kind of like mid-month or so. So we're seeing like the 12-month TC23 out right now. And of course, those numbers will change as that 13th month happens and everything gets kind of readjusted and reallocated. But even kind of to try to wash out some of those timing issues, if we look at just the quarter change, so that the fourth quarter of the fiscal year, really the COVID-19 impact, right? April, May, June, in a couple of different revenue collection sources. General sales tax up 4.7%, and that for those 3 months relative to last year. Better than maybe some of us were anticipating. Now, we think about where Utah economic growth has been, where population growth has been, where wage growth has been, and a revenue forecast would have called for more growth in that general sales tax. But the fact that that's not negative is good. I mean, that was something that was surprising to some of us. Motor fuel tax collections down 17%. So, right, different degrees. Every corner has been impacted to different degrees. We do see, looking at some of those transportation data coming out of UDOT, we do see that, those seem to be stabilizing potentially, but again, we've got some concerns about what happens into the fall with health, and that would be something to kind of plan for. Beer tax is up 10.3%. So, I guess depending on, some people are changing their behaviors. I don't know if that's good or bad, but we're seeing impacts there. Transient room tax down over 60%. Like I said, as I share this information with you, hopefully it helps kind of inform what your thinking is given the makeup of your local economy. And those local economies that are very much concentrated in travel and tourism are obviously much more challenged than those economies that maybe have a little bit more diversity, retail type things and such. I'm going to kind of go quickly because we have lots of great things to hear from after my presentation, but just going back to like the local perspective, I didn't get a chance to map these data for you, but if we look at continuing unemployment claims, those people are still receiving unemployment insurance. We look at the first week of July, we can have some kind of weird timing holiday stuff in there, but still it's a good indicator. 2020 through 2019. So that's after everything is settled. These are the number of people that are still on unemployment insurance. In Utah, it's almost 80,000 folks are still on unemployment insurance. And I mean, you can just see the comparisons, right? Garfield County, the continuing claims, 4,000% increase. And this is where I start when I'm thinking about the future, I start to have concerns because remember, that $600 additional weekly, these folks are receiving that. That's going away. And I know we're talking about like stimulus moving forward, but the numbers have improved significantly. But, I mean, how much of that's kind of propped up by stimulus and the fact that we don't, we still have elevated numbers. Even Rich County, you still have 3 times the number of folks claiming unemployment insurance right now than you did at this point last year. So yeah, a total improvement, but still something that is a challenge. So what does it all mean? Current Utah expectations, big asterisk, I probably should have made that bigger. We assume, so when we're talking about expectations, we assume there will be a second federal stimulus package. We assume there will be no major spiking second wave of the virus. I mean, there's still, it's still at play, but we don't think part of what's underpinning this forecast is we don't think it will be a large spike and therefore shut down. So assuming that the worst is over, those peak job losses were in April, we are assuming that there will be we are seeing what we're calling a gradual reactivation of the economy. So there's no situation where you have a full recovery in the state of Utah without some sort of treatment or a vaccine. There's no scenario where you have full recovery in Utah where the rest of the United States is still in this contracted mode. But we do see that recovery underway, and we do see it happening under these assumptions. We're calling it a swoosh, right? You've been hearing about the V recovery because of the severity of the downturn. We don't see a jump back to previous economic levels in a very concentrated way. We see it more gradual, a swoosh, if you will. I think we're calling it a check mark for a while, but maybe a swoosh is a better visualization of what we're expecting. So I don't know, is it Nike? Just do it. Remember those unequal and uneven impacts. That reactivation is going to vary by industry and geography. So as you're kind of thinking about your budgets, it's smart to be thinking for additional disruptions. Like, we don't expect anything near as severe, but we do think we're going to see an unequal and uneven reactivation. Recovery depends on adaptations, policy interventions, and medical science kind of underpins like my big disclaimer. And I think it's fair to say that there will be no back to normal. There's really, I think that this event, that's what we want to call it, has accelerated a lot of trends and has also maybe pushed some new trends. And so we will emerge into a new economy. And so as you're thinking about kind of what that new economy looks like, and it's stolen straight from Natalie Gochner because her thinking is just so good on this. And again, this is kind of what we're dealing with in the short term, but longer term, the banking situation, zero interest rates. It's interesting to be thinking about this, but deglobalization, I mean, that's not like a sure thing, but it's something definitely to be considering in the new normal. In terms of, like I mentioned, an acceleration of trends, all of us are participating in this town hall in this virtual way. And I think that, we were likely on a path to this eventually in some form or function anyway, but the COVID-19 event has accelerated that change. And so I don't need to read through all of these, but they'll be in the slides, just some things to think about. In the interest of time, I'm going to just hop through a couple more slides and then be done, because I know, again, I have some really great speakers for you. But stimulus, we'll be hearing about that later. Moody's Economy.com has done some analysis on biggest bang for the buck in stimulus. So we call them GDP multipliers. How much a stimulus policy spins through the economy. Highest would be SNAP. Lowest are actually stimulus checks. And that really has to do with the fact that when a personal stimulus check is given to a higher income household who currently has employment, they're quite likely to just save that check and not necessarily push it out into the economy. So that can have a lower multiplier. It's still above 1, it still spins into the economy, but that would, based on this analysis, that would be the result. And then just because of Economist, and I have all of your attention, and I think that you get reports across your desk that talk about economic multipliers. Let me take this time to show you that the highest economic multiplier on this graph from newseconomy.com is 1.7. It's a great multiplier. A multiplier of 2 is a great multiplier. If you get proposals for economic policy interventions with economic multipliers of 6, 7, 8, 9, it's not. You should take a look at that analysis. So, for what it's worth, thank you for letting me share that with you. So, finally, just look out this week for Utah Leads Together. That is obviously coming out of the governor's office with the Utah State Legislature. Our office, the Gardner Policy Institute, the David Eccles School of Business, is playing a supporting role there. But you will see version 5 coming out this week. So again, because we look to leadership of Capitol Hill to really share that with you. But I think that, again, we were the first in the country to have a written plan. The next plan will provide some more kind of clarity on governance and structure, and what does the next horizon look like in terms of addressing the virus and economic recovery. Totally, completely intertwined. So look out for that. And I'm not sure if I have time for questions, but I'm happy to take some questions. Otherwise, so happy to connect with you offline at any time. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Juliet. And if there are questions, put them in the chat box. We will follow up with you after the town hall, or if there's time at the end. Juliet referenced that the Utah Leads Together 5.0 plan will be coming out this week. So stay tuned. We'll get information out to you as soon as we have it. And I thought, Juliet, there were 2 major takeaways that are perfect segues to the next part of our conversation. One was about the multiplier of direct federal assistance to state and local governments. So when we get to Wayne's portion of the presentation, that's a key component. And you talked about how the next steps of the COVID-19 recovery and the impact of COVID-19 has been unequal and uneven. And that is a perfect segue, unfortunately, for the conversation now with Nubia Byron and Z, who I introduced at the beginning of the town hall. So Nubia, as the Director of the Division of Multicultural Affairs, I will turn it over to you to take it away with your team to talk about some of the specific impacts of COVID-19 on communities of color.
Thank you so very much, Cameron. Can you hear me and see me okay?
I can both hear you and see you, and we'll plan on going with you until 3:47, and then at that point we'll pivot to Wayne and to Tony. So for attendees, we'll probably go till about 4:05 rather than 4 o'clock.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so very much. And we'll try to keep our remarks brief. But again, I just want to thank you for inviting us to present around the critical conversation about the impacts of COVID-19 on our underrepresented communities, as well as share the purpose of the Multicultural Subcommittee to Utah's Coronavirus Task Force. So as a brief introduction to the Division of Multicultural Affairs, our mission is to promote an inclusive climate for Utah's diverse communities and populations. And our vision is to be a model state by ensuring equitable resources and services to all who call Utah home. And as many of you know, on March 6th of this year, Governor Herbert declared a state of emergency in Utah due to the pandemic. And we recognize that in the face of such an unprecedented situation, there would be many social, cultural, and economic dimensions, some of which were already discussed, and some of which will continue to unpack during our portion, that we wanted to make sure that we addressed, specifically as it related to communities of color. So we sought to establish a baseline of immediate needs and unique barriers faced by disenfranchised populations during the outbreak to better inform our state leaders of the growing gaps and to solve these concerns together. So with your permission, can I share the screen? Thank you. Let me just make sure.
Yep, you should be able to.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Let me make sure that the slides come up clearly.
Yep, there you are.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, perfect. All right, so I don't want to necessarily take too much time here, but I do just want to focus on a few specific items that we found, because we conducted a survey with our communities and our multiple partners that were providing direct services to the communities that we predominantly serve. And one of the questions that we asked was, what were the unique barriers faced by clients in light of COVID-19 And again, just to recognize that we're short on time, I wanted to focus on a few. Access to computers and technology, 75.27% noted that this was an issue for them. So not being able to have access to Wi-Fi, to laptops, being unable to navigate some of the quickly developing information as it relates to guidelines, directives, prevention practices, not being able to log on to your school for our kids, especially when schools close down. There are studies that are showing that there's a number of children that have not logged on to their studies, and so that divide continues to grow. For food insecurity, we saw 74% that noted that was a concern. So many families that were unable to maybe do large bulk buying or to go to the store and make sure that they would be able to buy food for several weeks in advance. We have families that are navigating this, living paycheck to paycheck, and that was a very difficult experience for them. Also, not having culturally relevant food at some of our food pantries, or having food pantries that didn't have applications in multiple languages. So there are many barriers that were being experienced. Access to internet services, misinformation, housing insecurity. This also was interconnected with interfamilial violence. So many people now know that with domestic violence, we have seen our numbers skyrocket in Utah as well as across the nation. 75% of increase of cases in Utah County. We've also have had 22% of increase in Salt Lake County, and we can continue to see that trend in other areas. But again, we know that for housing, that also looks like rental assistance, the need for families that were left out of the stimulus support, rental assistance and housing insecurity that we're seeing right now for families that don't know how to navigate the multiple ways in which you might be able to receive assistance from the state, or they might not be able to, again, because there might be fear for immigration status, undocumented status, and fear of the public charge rule. There's also fear or lack of access to healthcare services, language barriers. For those that are limited English proficient, they were having to navigate a lot of the information that was coming out of the state, as well as local counties and municipalities in English only. And so for them, they were again unable to have equitable access to information that could have served and been life-saving. Fear of deportation, fear of negative repercussions to immigrant status, landlord-tenant concerns. So there was an increase of predatory schemes that were happening where people were being forced out of their homes. And again, this is something that not only impacts multicultural, disenfranchised, and historically underserved community, but it impacts the larger community as well. So with that, we created the report, and we do invite you all to download it. It is available on our website, multicultural.utah.gov, so that you can read it in length. And what I would say is that this is beginning to tell a story, but it's not a complete story. We now know that this is interconnected to several other issues, and so we invite partnership. We invite people to think through, how is COVID-19 pandemic a pre-existing issue, right? How have those issues that were existing long before the pandemic not only come to light, but have been magnified, compounded, and really creating some devastating outcomes for the most underserved in our communities. So one of the recommendations that we included in our report was for the task force to create a specific and dedicated group of individuals that would be able to address these needs and the growing gaps in our communities. And so the governor has appointed our division to oversee the Multicultural Subcommittee, which is co-chaired by both Byron Russell and Zeman Zhao, who are on the call with us. And I invite Byron to tell us a little bit more about the purpose and our charge of this committee.
Well, thank you, Nubia, and Cameron, thank you again. You all should know that Cameron is truly extraordinary. He seems to be everywhere, and he reached out to us to invite us to participate in some of these great issues that concern the entire state. And I think the League does a fine job of including and coordinating and allowing us to show you what we are doing. And so, as Nubia had mentioned, when there was this pandemic, we really did have to do a record amount of turnaround. And Nubia has the most extraordinary team at the Multicultural Affairs Office. And you would think it was the Gates Foundation, but it's literally like 4 people who are just a dynamo. And they put this survey out very quickly. And this survey allowed us to put together a multicultural subcommittee that essentially could fill some gaps, that could really provide information to our state leadership. And, you know, I mean, the idea maybe that we would get together as a little group and we would talk amongst each other about how bad things are, or we could actually be part of the governor's office of the task force, if you will, and part of the org chart to actually feed into public safety and to the Department of Health and to education and other areas. And so with the results of the survey that were sent out, that gave us a greater indication of what kind of individuals and leaders we should have on our subcommittee. So if you look at our subcommittee list, you'll see the list of members who are associated. And, you know, we really could use a lot more people, but we had to make sure that we had enough people that could meet every week. We meet every single Friday at 3 o'clock. And we have a wide group of individuals who serve the subcommittee. And if you look at the next 2 slides, you'll see who some of these people are if you don't know them already. Obviously, Nubia is just, I mean, she is like the bomb. She comes to us with an incredible passion, but also is an attorney. And we were so fortunate to select her for the Multicultural Commission. And as we looked at things like the social determinants of health, which really do impact our people of color, our minority populations, and zip codes throughout the state that have very specific areas that need support, the pandemic actually actualized them. And so, you know, Juliet is more than familiar with the Gardner Institute's focus on the social determinants of health, but it's really this moment where we're trying to not only address the immediate needs, but we're also looking at ways to address the systemic issues that plague our state, our cities, and our country, essentially, whether it's access to healthcare, whether it's access to education. And so as you look through this list of individuals and these beautiful pictures of these beautiful people, they every single week, beyond our meetings together, have work groups. And those work groups, you know, in health equity, in digital divide, in translation communication, in other areas that are really afflicting our minority communities during this pandemic. There's a lot of work to be done. And to be perfectly honest, you know, as we started off, we really had a lot on our plate, but we've learned to adjust and to do what we can do best. With leaders like Jess Anderson in public safety, and Mike Haddon with the Department of Corrections, and Tammy Pfeiffer at Education, and Asha Prena at Department of Workforce Services. I mean, there is so much talent and so much knowledge. And of course, those are our state leaders who we rely upon. Those are our allies. We can't do everything ourselves, nor can Nubia's team. However, we're making a big impact. And I think when I say a big impact, it's an impact that's being made that wasn't in place before. And if it really wasn't for this group, we would not have been able to get things like translation funded. We would not have been able to get these grants that Nubia referenced, and we'll talk a little bit more about. But essentially, you know, we are, you know, moving in a direction that I think helps, us to listen to our needs, to address the concerns, and then to act upon them the best we can. And part of the wonderful thing about our group that comes together every week is that we listen to some of our organizations that have various challenges, that have unique circumstances that just open our eyes and sometimes actually make our eyes water a little bit just because of the normal struggles that people go through every single day. And as you look at this resource partner coalition, there's one group that's missing, and it's the Utah League of Cities and Towns. And that's in the sense that because it's a given, everybody, no one does anything in this community without talking to Cameron first. Okay, so let's just state that as it is. Having said that, there have been so many other people who work with us on a formal basis, an informal basis, or we just are in the sort of framework of listening to a lot of individuals. And the reason that these resource partner coalitions are so vital is because, as much as I'd like to say that government has a lot of resource and that can take leadership, a lot of our communities, if not a lot of communities in general, there's a little bit of a trust deficit, right? When the state says something, it's taken as expected, but is it taken as much trust, say, for example, with the library system or other partners who are on the ground and working? And so we take our purpose seriously. And as you can see here in this slide, we work in collaboration with existing frameworks to amplify efforts to alleviate the growing disparities faced by marginalized and unrepresented communities. And as I mentioned, we have these short-term goals that we will hope address the existing challenges the pandemic has compounded through both practical efforts and policy initiatives. And that is really, to some degree, where the Multicultural Commission acts as a policy feeding organization to bring best practices and on-the-ground knowledge to our lawmakers, to our state leaders, and to bring that information from the ground up. And that, to us, is very important because our charge is to elevate best practices inspired by individual collective achievements, coordinate an infrastructure for individuals and groups to work together statewide, to connect state and private resources to the community, and then to accelerate existing resources to programs for greatest impact. And so our charge and our purpose is essential to our being and how we measure our success. And so, and if that sounds really great, especially the charge that we did, it's because the next speaker, Zeeman Zhao, and her brilliant mind actually helped us put that together. So with that, Z, I might have sounded intelligent because I read what you wrote for all of us, but Z is the real brilliant one. So Z, you're up.
Thank you, Byron, and thank you, Nubia. Thank you, Cameron, for inviting us. We want to make sure that what we're doing with the COVID-19 subcommittee is also measurable. So we have set up short-term goals as well as long-term objectives. In the immediate short term, we really want to increase language access, information through translation, interpretation, and literacy skill consideration. During pandemic, it was really evident that a lot of residents are not getting the information in a way that is equitable. The second short-term initiative we want to do is make sure that we assist the coordination of this of information through non-traditional channels for mass access. Again, that is really important to a multicultural subcommittee because of a committee is not getting the same access to those informations. And I think we have shared with you, and many of you might have seen the multicultural PSA that we have put together, as well as a PSA that is put together by a faith-based communities. We're making sure that the message is getting to all of our community there. The third thing is to increase service engagement in underserved communities so that they're able to access essential needs. It's overwhelming to hear week after week through our subcommittees that there are families who are still not getting enough food. They're still not having enough money to pay for rent. And those are so critical, and we want to make sure that we address those gaps immediately. The other thing is to amplify and elevate efforts that community advocates already engage in. We know that our community is doing a lot of great work, and it's our job to really elevate and make sure that we identify those best practices and share it with the rest of our community. The last thing that we want to do is make sure that there is transparency and that there is efforts for us to build that trust that's necessary. So those are some of the short-term deliverables. I also want to mention some of the long-term. We know that the systemic inequities we're seeing is not just due to the pandemic, but it's systemic. And so we want to look at the long-term goals to address that. Some of the long-term goals is to influence state and local efforts that address the pre-existing disparities that are caused by the social determinant of health. We want to influence policy initiatives that prioritize equitable distribution of state and local resources. We want to make sure that we develop a language access plan so that moving forward, all residents are getting equal access to information. And lastly, we want to build a capacity in Utah's workforce to work with diverse communities through diversity, equity, and inclusion training. Next slide. We have, I think Byron already mentioned this, we have strategic work groups that are working on each of the areas on food access, social services and housing, language accessibility, information, communications, digital divide, and economic stability. And all those work groups are creating action plans. I think I mentioned this already. We have a campaign message that introvate diverse and multicultural PSA that we'll share with you. We have some great partnerships with individuals such as organizations such as Select Health and Intermountain. And we're working with state agencies to increase access for multicultural communities. Just most recently, the Department of Workforce Services is streamlining their application process for rental assistance. So we are all making some really concrete improvements to access in services. We also want to close the communication gap with CBOs and the state agencies and advocate for funding and support for CBOs, which leads us to a big announcement, and that is the creation of the Racial Equity and Inclusion COVID-19 grants. We were successful to get $1 million of the CARES Act funding go towards this particular grant program. In addition to that, we are also fundraising from the private sectors to help us grow that $1 million and have more funding available to our communities. So just some details about the grant. This grant will be released in early August. The grant is up to $50,000 that will be provided to organizations in Utah who will provide emergency basic need assistance to multicultural communities, including utilities, rent, transportation, food assistance, and case management. Next slide. The priority will be given to organizations that are led by racially and ethnically diverse individuals, serve historically underserved population, including Blacks, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, Pacific Islanders, and people of color, and advance racial equity in the state of Utah. And we're really excited about this particular grant program. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Byron to finish up. I know we're 2 minutes over our time.
Well, and I won't be very long in the sense that it was really great of Cameron to invite us, because we recognize that we live in this Salt Lake City, Salt Lake County bubble, and the entire state. This is a state commission, and we know that there are communities, you know, as Juliet pointed out, there were non-farm jobs. Well, there are farm jobs, and there are people who are struggling throughout the state of color who are contributing to our economy for us to get to that point. But first, we have to take care of these groups that are being supported by CBOs. And these CBOs understand the very immediate nature and incredible need and desire. And so these grants, we were very pleased with. Of course, Nubia said, well, what about 10 million? What do you mean $1 million? You'll get to know Nubia at some point and you'll realize that that's exactly what she would say. But we'll handle the $1 million with a very scrutinizing advisory council. We've already gone over the applications. We expect them to be distributed probably next week, if not a little earlier. And we are already in touch with some of the organizations we know are struggling to make sure that their mission and their services are being provided. And so we are really excited about this portal, or the information that you will receive, or this community will receive to apply. And to apply for this position will be through the Department of Heritage and Arts portal, sort of like the Arts Council does with grants that are approved and then measured upon their success. So with that, I'll let Nubia, I'll ask Nubia to close out.
Thank you so very much, Byron. I apologize if there's some noise in the babackground, but I did just want to note that Andrew Gruber is watching the town hall, and he is a partner of ours. WFRC, UDOT, and UTA are working with our subcommittee to make sure that we are addressing concerns of transportation, because that is a part of the social determinants conversation, and he has been an exceptional partner that has said, how do we help? How do we make sure that equity is at the heart of our conversations? And so I just wanted to acknowledge him, as well as mention that I'll happily add the link to our report in the chat in just a moment. But the last thing I wanted to say is, especially Cameron, as you're talking about what we are seeing nationally and how the conversation continues to develop around racial justice, for us to really have a complete recovery, we have to depend on inclusion. We have to ensure that the most vulnerable are covered and considered. And we have to think about this from a multicultural as well as intersectional framework. Who do we leave behind and who are the most vulnerable? Because if we cover them, then I think the rest of our community will be able to move forward as well. So with that, again, Cameron, we thank you for the time. We are so grateful for the platform, and we look forward to partnering with you on several initiatives moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you, Nubia and Byron and Z, for joining us. So everyone knows they presented to the League Board of Directors last month. If you have additional questions or want to engage with Nubia's team, we'll provide all the contact information in our follow-up email that will also have all the resources from today's presentation that will go out tomorrow. I should note that the League has also been coordinating with the Multicultural Affairs Commission on our Love, Listen, Lead initiative around community trust and public safety, and the policy discussions around police and how they engage with the community and on equity issues. They've been a very valuable resource as we've proceeded on that effort. They also have access to a lot of sobering but important data about the impact of COVID-19 on communities of color, both economic and health-wise, everything from joblessness to PPP access to the transmission rates. So if you are interested in that information, please use them as a resource, and we're happy to connect you. So Nubia, thanks again to you and your team. And then I should also note that the first time I met Byron, I asked the question that I'm sure many people are wondering: how often do you get confused for former Jazz forward Brian Russell? And Byron laughed. And how many times, Byron, have you been asked that question during the many years that you've lived in Utah?
Many times. So we settled the problem by getting rid of him and making him go to another team because I was just tired of him. That was the answer.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, thanks again to the three of you for joining us. Again, we're planning to go a few minutes after 4 today, so hopefully people can stick around for the final 2 presentations. Wayne Bradshaw, we've talked before about CARES Act implementation, and we're expecting a 4th stimulus. And actually, during this meeting, we've gotten some news alerts that that 4th stimulus, at least the Senate Republican version, may finally be on its way to publication. So what can you tell us about both the implementation on the CARES Act and where things are at on the 4th stimulus from your home office there in Alaska?
Thanks, Cam. I'm actually downtown Salt Lake, so no one has to worry. I have not left the state yet. Yeah, just a quick update on the 4th stimulus, and then I'll touch on the CARES Act and some of the more commonly asked questions that we're getting. So if you remember, in May, the House passed the HEROES Act, which was a $3 trillion stimulus, which included about $600 billion to be allocated directly to local governments. As we speak, the Senate is releasing their version of a 4th stimulus. It includes a $1 trillion package, but does not have any direct funding or additional funding for local government. What we have been informed, and we're still waiting to confirm, but what we've been told is that there will be additional flexibility for the CARES money that you have received or will receive from the state or county. It increases the runway in which you have to spend those dollars. It would allow you to utilize those dollars more flexibly within your general fund. It would not allow you to use it for retirement benefits or to replenish rainy day funds, but you would have more flexibility. And then it clarifies that there can't be additional restrictions on those dollars outside of what the Treasury and the CARES Act had put in place in the first place. So that is what we're anticipating will be in the Senate version. That obviously is not the final product. There will be negotiations between the House and the Senate, but the administration and Republicans are set around the $1 trillion mark. In our Friday Facts on July 24th, which I'm sure you all waited to read that before you went and enjoyed your Pioneer Day, we included what our board is supporting for a forced stimulus. And just to remind you, that is for a direct allocation for critical services as well as infrastructure. And in our Friday facts, and we can resend it in tomorrow's summary, it includes the district and state directors for the entire delegation, the communications we have sent to them, as well as the NLC's Cities Are Essential campaign. If you have issues with the CARES Act dollars you have now or needs in a forced stimulus, we encourage you to contact your member of the delegation and let them know directly what you would like to see in a forced stimulus. So we've got the two markers, the House and the Senate kind of have their proposals out there, but our delegation needs to hear from you directly. Moving on to the CARES Act, one of our most commonly asked questions, and we addressed this in a previous town hall, is the question of whether you can utilize CARES Act dollars for your public safety. We addressed that in the guidance and the frequently asked questions. It states that you can presume that your public safety are substantially dedicated to COVID-19 related issues, and you can use your CARES Act funding for that. Since then, we have seen additional communications from the Treasury as well as presentations that make it very clear that that is a use for your CARES Act funding, and it is an accepted use to cover public safety expenses. We still would encourage you as a city to look at how far that would go within your community, whether your the designation is green, yellow, orange, kind of where you fall in the public health emergency. So still take all of those things into consideration, but we just wanted to communicate that is becoming much more clear that public safety is an allowable use for your CARES Act funding. So that's all I have, Cam, unless you wanted to add to that or if there are additional questions.
Wayne, can you mention just what the feedback has been from the 6 members of the delegation, particularly Senator Romney's office, but from Congressman Curtis and the other members of the delegation when we met with them over the last couple of weeks?
Sure. We have engaged with the delegation, like Cam stated, to one, we're asking for that clarity with CARES Act funding on how it is appropriated and how it should be managed within cities and towns, and that has been accepted. We've discussed different proposals on how that could be included in a forced stimulus. As far as additional funds, Senator Romney has been very clear that it needs to be based on data. And then he had his op-ed in the Deseret News a couple weekends ago where he stated that he supports additional funds for lost revenue up to 90%. So his office has been very supportive. And then, like I said, the other office have talked about flexibility as well.
Perfect. And one thing that I'll add is that Congressman Curtis, actually at our request, was working on some language to try to insert into the fourth stimulus on the clarity piece that Wayne referenced. And I know he's been working closely with some cities in Utah County on that point. Earlier today, Juliet referenced that she and I were on a call with the governor's Economic Recovery Task Force, our regular Monday call. And in that call, we agreed to send a letter from the Economic Recovery Task Force to the delegation supporting a fourth stimulus. And one of the 5 key principles would be additional direct aid to state and local governments. So that way, the ask is not just coming from local governments, but would also be coming from the business community, the legislature, and other key stakeholders. And so I was actually working on a draft of that letter this afternoon that will be sent to the delegation before the end of the day. So a lot of moving parts. Once that fourth stimulus comes out, Wayne, can you just give a quick sense of the timing that we're hearing from the National League of Cities about when a potential fourth stimulus bill could pass and what the running clock is?
Yeah, so indications are that it'll be the last thing they pass before they take their August recess, and they're anticipating that both the House and Senate will probably have to stay in until through the first or even the part of the second week of August. So if something is going to pass before then, it will be middle of August.
It's almost like there's an election year and people want to get the big bills done so they can get on the campaign trail. So Wayne, thanks for staying on top of that. If you have any questions about either the CARES Act implementation or the fourth stimulus, please let us know. The state will be looking at distributing their second tranche of CARES Act dollars in August. So there's going to be a lot of focus, both state and federally, around the federal money for local and state governments. So thanks, Wayne. Tony, we're going to wrap things up with you as the Media Relations Manager at Covet. Talk to us about the new In Utah program that Covet has unveiled in recent days.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for having me. I will be very respectful of time. So let me share my screen really quick. Can you all see that? Great. All right. So In Utah campaign, it was commissioned by the legislature, and it's using federal CARES Act funds. And we have partnered with Rumor Advertising to help us market this campaign. And to give you a brief overview of it, we want people to, especially Utahns, to spend money in Utah, to help out our local economy, to help us all stay healthy. And we believe that with the In Utah campaign, we can all do that as we work together. So the focus of it is to elevate, educate, and engage. So we want to help Utahns build consumer confidence. We want Utahns to be comfortable to purchase Utah products and to purchase Utah products, whether that's going in store with a mask if those stores are open, or even purchasing those Utah products online, whatever you prefer. Also to educate Utahns. One of our big focuses right now of this campaign is we have the Healthy in Utah campaign. We want to focus on this section first because we want Utahns to be healthy, to help stop spread the coronavirus, to follow CDC guidelines by wearing a mask, washing your hands, and practicing that social distancing, and just engaging in our economy to try to do anything we can to help make it better. Some of the strategies, I'm going to kind of quickly go over these slides because I don't have a ton of time. But so our hashtag is In Utah, and the website is inutah.org. We also have it in Spanish, and utah.org. And then our social media handles are all in Utah. Now I know the Instagram says all.in.utah, but we've actually changed that to all in Utah. So I invite you all to visit our social media, to follow us on social media, and to take part in this campaign together. We want this to be a community effort. We want this to be a statewide effort to where we can all contribute together. So these are some examples of some of our billboards. Actually, just today, the Shop in Utah was announced, and it's a $25 million total grant where businesses can apply. And if they offer, for example, let's say you have a restaurant and they do a buy one, get one free. If they want to do that up to $5,000, this grant will be $10,000. And so it's a way for consumers to take advantage of this, and also for businesses to grow and to help them during this very, very difficult time. So I invite you, if you know any small businesses or any Utah businesses that would be able to take advantage of this, please direct them to business.utah.gov, and they can find the information there. And then of course, inutah.org. Play in Utah, grow in Utah, dine in Utah. Are you in? Support local businesses. Good for you, good for Utah. Anything to do with helping our state out in Utah, that's what In Utah is about. This is an example of some marketing that would be done at City Creek or around downtown. Come in, we're Utah, we're open for business. This is an example of what our Instagram would look like. An example of a digital ad that we haven't done yet, but we would do on KSL. Just we want this all around the state. We want it on billboards. We want it on digital media. We want it in newspapers. We want it on TV. We want to show that even though the coronavirus is going on, Utah's open for business. But as I stated, we want to be safe with everything that we do. We also want the community to be involved. So we want you to share your hashtag in Utah. So if you are practicing social distancing and outdoors and you're in a Utah location, hashtag in Utah, share it with us. Let me quickly go over. Okay, so some of the ideas that we have is we want to do marketing. We want apparel. We want pins. We want this on bags. And we want to partner with local businesses to help us get this information out. We have several icons that kind of show people's hobbies. There's a fly fishing one. I love fly fishing in Utah. It's not on here, but it was created, and that's what I use in my email signature. And it's something that that represents me, and we want these icons to represent you as well. Stickers, mugs. A lot of people like the Made in Utah baby. I recently just had a daughter, so I definitely want to get that onesie for her. Shirts in Utah.
Yeah, you and me both. Tony, how old is your daughter?
3 months. So.
Okay, you're a little ahead of ours is 8 weeks.
So anyways, and I know we're definitely running out of time, but let me just go to the very end here so I can, please, if you, actually, sorry, there is a partners page on the website. It's hard when you don't have a lot of time, so much information. There is a part on our website. Good. There's a part on our website where you can go, and it's a partner section. So there you can go and fill out some information. We would love to partner with you. Also, if you have any feedback for us, please email us at inutah@utah.gov. Of course, I know this was quick. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. And I don't know, do they get your information from you, Cameron? Do they get my information?
Yep. So Tony, this whole presentation will be in our follow-up email tomorrow that will go to everyone, as well as the link to this presentation. So just Perfect. Make sure you email this over to us, and then that way everybody can see all the slides, and hopefully we'll sign on as partners.
Perfect. And like I said, please visit inutah.org, follow us on social, and to learn more about these grants, visit business.utah.gov.
Terrific. And the grants open when?
So a lot of the grants are already open and ongoing. The shop in Utah just opened today, and it is a first come first served basis. So for those businesses.
Perfect. So this is a great way. This is a great way for city leaders to distribute the information to the businesses in their community. And for the shop in Utah grant, it opened today, so you're among the first to see it. So please share it far and wide with your business leaders in town so that they can apply for the grant.
Great. Thank
Perfect.
You so much.
Great. Well, thank you, Tony, and thank you, Juliet, Nubia, Byron, Z, and Wayne for joining us today. We'll see everyone back at our Economic Response Town Hall in a couple of weeks, unless events in DC necessitate a sooner town hall. But thank you to everyone for joining us, and watch for the follow-up email tomorrow with the information that you heard today. Thanks, everyone.